everyone, it's Kandace and Sher with Processing Trauma Out Loud. Sher, we got into, I'm going to call it a deep well in our last episode around the topic of being a wild woman of desire in such a good way. And today we are going to further the conversation, and you're going to bring a question to our listeners that we're also going to process with one another. So do you want to just jump in and share the question, or what are your thoughts before you even bring the question?
Yeah, last week we talked about desire and some of our preliminary feelings and thoughts on desire. And you made a comment about how sometimes women are accused of having desires that are too big or too much or unrealistic or foolish. And then you made this comment that your experience is that you see women more willing to settle for breadcrumbs than to dream big and ask for a lot. And so I want us to talk today about one of the questions that I had originally prepared for this discussion that we had, which is, what feelings come up for you when you consider embracing the belief that you don't deserve mere crumbs, but are made for lavish outpourings of goodness and love?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a question we really want our listeners to ponder. And we're going to just talk about it a little bit. I want to just repeat that. What feelings come up for you when you consider embracing the belief that you don't deserve mere crumbs, but that you are actually created for lavish outpourings of goodness and love?
Mm-hmm. So I told you before we pushed record that I feel a little fired up today in this space. Excuse me. But I'm going to go back to where I like to start, and that is the very beginning. Every child that comes into the world, every baby, is worthy of and deserves lavish pourings of goodness and love. They weren't, we don't bring a baby into the world and say, let's just give them barely enough to survive.
Yeah.
And, that sounds ludicrous, because it is. Like, babies need so much in terms of physical touch, emotional safety, physical safety, practical things, food, and protection. And when a child gets, like, babies get crumbs, and then the toddler gets crumbs, and then the elementary school age kid gets crumbs. I'm going to stop for a second. I feel like I just want to reiterate this. This is not about making excuses for how we're showing up in adulthood. It is to plead with society that when those needs and desires do not get met in a lavish way, we will still have that same deep hunger as an adult. On the back of my memoir, I say something like, unhealed wounds or unmet needs do not go away chronologically with age.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of shame around this. There's a lot of confusion when we are in adult bodies and we start to wake up to, wait a minute, I was created for more than crumbs. And I have this deep need and desire to not only be lavished with goodness and love, but the truth is, when we are in that space, we desire to pour it back out.
Mm.
But we have some gaps, we have some holes in the foundation that we have to take time to get filled in a good way, in a healthy way.
Yeah. I'm thinking, as you're talking, I'm thinking about a podcast that has been really meaningful for both of us. And that is Adam Young's podcast, The Place We Find Ourselves. I believe it's episode number 2, where he talks about the 6 things that every child needs for healthy development.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the things that you mentioned, of course, food and physical needs, but then it's also attunement, emotional attunement, and the regulating of our dysregulation. When a baby is crying, we need somebody to come and soothe. And when we don't get that, like you're saying, we grow up and those needs are still real inside of us. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and it can feel so shameful when we get dysregulated and our affect gets out of kilter and the demand looks huge or the desire looks voracious.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And how can we move toward that? We're talking, as we always say, we're talking to people who have childhood trauma. So probably every listener is resonating to some degree with the knowledge that in childhood, they didn't get what they needed. We didn't get what we needed to help us know that abundance is there and that our needs are going to be provided for and that we are safe. And once our body gets this sense of, I'm not safe, that controls so much of our lives.
Yeah, I would say almost everything.
Yeah.
And, the truth is, and let's just bring compassion in on this in case there's, a parent that maybe is beating themselves up over, like, I think I just gave my child more crumbs than the feast. And if that's true, it's because your parent also was in survival mode. Your parent has also been accustomed to crumbs. And so you and I both have had experiences and then working with clients. Sometimes the adult child shows up first for healing and can sometimes invite the parent on board. And when both are saying yes, it's such a beautiful repair because this can be repaired.
Yeah.
And so, or when the parent goes first, like you and I did in our families, not saying our kids didn't do any type of work, but when we went deep into our own stories, and then we went back to our children to initiate repair, there can be beautiful healing within those relationships. So we don't want to make this sound like doom and gloom. Like we're doing this because we believe there's hope.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring us back to our question. We're talking about it, but I want to bring us back to our question because when we grew up in a context of emotional rupture, physical rupture too, but I will just say emotional rupture, our ability to identify our desires is impaired.
Mm-hmm.
We might feel like we want too much and we can never get it, or we might really shut down our desires and say, oh, I don't need that. The bare minimum is good enough for me. And so I want to bring us back to our question of what feelings come up for you when you consider embracing the belief that you were not made for breadcrumbs, but that you are made for lavish outpourings of goodness and love. So I'll just ask you, Kandace, has there been times in your life when you felt like you were made for breadcrumbs?
My whole life. Yeah.
Okay.
For some reason, I'm thinking of Dan Siegel's analogy of the river. And so when we have had childhood trauma, our desires will either be rigid. So there's two banks on both sides of one side on the other side. So one of those is rigidity, meaning we shut down our desires. Mm-hmm. And the other side is chaotic. So when I hear that question and I look at my attachment wounding as being fearful avoidant, it has been a back and forth of rigidity and chaotic with a heavy leaning on the chaotic, which would be more anxious attachment.
Yeah.
And then the rigidity would be more of the avoidant attachment. So it's been super painful and super problematic in my um, ability to turn towards myself with compassion and kindness.
Mm.
What about you?
Yeah, let's just stay with you for a minute longer if we can, and then we'll flip
That
over to
was a
me.
great deflection, wasn't it? What about you?
Well
Let's move
done, but I
on.
caught you. I caught you there. I caught you. And yeah, I'm catching you. I'm catching your heart there because yeah, it's yeah, to recognize that and to recognize the need to shut down or the fear of overflowing the banks or both sides, right? Is hard. And I know you're in a space now of some new things coming and I'm wondering how this is playing out for you in your sense of desire as you look forward and
Mhm.
hold desire in a new way. Like saying, I want more than crumbs. I'm not settling for crumbs. And yet, then also knowing that in the past you've had this experience of the chaotic, and yet knowing that you're made for abundance and goodness. How are you holding that and what's stirring inside as you're facing this place where you are right now?
Mhm. This feels like a really big question, and I'm I will just say that come like this awakening. So there's healing and there's awakening, and there's some different aspects to those.
Hmm.
So as I've healed and I'm awakening to my desires that I do believe are good desires, because we're not talking about I need to be a millionaire or these are this is our inner landscape that we're talking about here. I can hold that I've gained the confidence, the clarity, and the courage to now ask for that, to seek it with the understanding that it's also my desire to be someone who can lavish others with real love.
Hmm.
Because the anxious attachment piece can look like love, but the motive is really just to get our own needs met.
Right.
So as I'm holding all these changes in my life,
Hmm.
I also am recognizing these people who I love are only going to benefit from my own healing and my own ability to get these things in me filled up. So it's holding.
Hmm.
I'm not bad. I'm not dangerous. I have a real story here that's getting healed.
Hmm.
And I'm doing that for the people that I love as well.
Yeah, I love that. And as you're holding bigger dreams and desires, as you're recognizing that you're letting yourself envision bigger things maybe than you have in the past, or more goodness, or more love, or whatever your desires are, what does that feel like at this point? Do you feel invited in? Do you feel nervous about it? What comes up?
Yeah, it feels so I have so much clarity right now and a sense of doing this for my good and the good of others that it keeps me daily going down the path that I know I'm being invited into and frankly called to.
Mm,
I'm called to continue to heal and grow so I can help other people also heal and grow.
mm,
But I still get triggered, right? Like we're in the middle of a move, and because of my stories of moving so much,
yeah,
like there have been times I literally feel paralyzed
yeah.
to pack or to move things. And, even as I say this, I feel like I'm trembling a little bit. I hate that. I
Mm.
hate that I can't just get her done. Like, I have to pull back and tend to that teenage girl that was so pissed that she
Mm.
had to pack her room again.
Yeah. Wow. Mm. Yeah, and I love your honesty saying I hate that, and I love your honesty saying that your need is to recognize that young part in you that
Mhm.
that's pissed that here we are again. And yet, it's not the same. You're
Mhm.
in a different space. And so as you tend to that young teenage girl part, you can go through it differently than you have ever been able to go through it before.
That's the goal, Cher.
That's the goal, baby.
Yeah, and I will say, Nathan brought it up yesterday, and he did it in a way that really helped me kind of slow down and like I can do it differently now.
Yeah.
So it was hard to hear, but it was a kindness to encourage me, like you can do this differently now.
Yeah, and you can. And we were just talking about how I said you can utilize more resources now. And you made the comment, I have resources now. And
Yes.
it's just so true. Yeah, you're not the person you were 5 years ago or 10 years ago where when you were triggered, you just went down, you went into the dysregulation and you got lost there. You're not
Yeah.
in that space now.
Yeah, I'm not that teenage girl that either went out and decided to get drunk or stoned. I'm not doing that.
Good. I'm glad,
Yes.
Candace. But
Yes.
if you need to,
I need to.
I will love you anyway.
I know you will, but
Yeah,
I don't want to, right?
I know. Yeah.
I want to stay fully present and work through this shit.
Yeah. I just want to I think I wanted to emphasize that because we have listeners that maybe would go into their old patterns. And the thing that we have said to each other a lot in our community is even if when you're triggered, you get taken out, because sometimes we do.
Mhm.
When we get triggered, we go into those young places in our brain and we can get taken out. And that if we do, we have people now that are going to move in close and help us find our way back out. And that is security. That is life changing.
I do want to mention really quick because I do want to turn the tables here, but we have a sister in our Pearls group, Sandra, who early on in my healing journey said something to me in the lines that you're talking about. Candace, even if
Yeah.
we are not going anywhere,
Yeah.
we are with you. And I mean, I don't think I had, well, in fact, it's not about I don't think. I have never had anyone say, even if you screw it all up, I'm not going anywhere. And I will tell you that opened a door way in my heart, in my mind, in my body that had never been opened, that has been so significant in my healing journey. I will be forever grateful. And I know it was true for all of you, right?
Oh,
But just hearing it.
it brings tears to my eyes to hear you say it again.
Mm.
And I remember the moment. And to hear Sandra say that to you, and I knew the message was for me too. And each
Mm.
one of us knows that that is the kind of sisterhood that we are in now. That um, even when our desires take us down a path that is hard or even hurtful for ourselves, we have people that are going to move in close, and it's a very unique and beautiful thing for me and you and us in our lives. Yeah.
Mhm. It is. Yeah. Yeah. So, Cher, what do you think about? Um, Actually, read your own question again so you can get it right.
What feelings come up for you when you consider embracing the belief that you don't deserve mere crumbs, but are made for lavish outpourings of goodness and love. And I'm just going to pause and say, I'm glad that I've read that like 4 times on this episode. And I hope that our listeners are hearing this is a really important question and something that I have pondered and I am pondering. And I think for me, and I'm in a space right now, I'll just mention this because I feel like it's significant for this particular question, but where I've been sharing a couple of my really difficult stories from my childhood trauma. And the person who I have been meeting with said the words to me after I shared a story that, you know, I had to go through like my, are you sure? Like, I need to hear you say that you're sure. And I know that this story is a lot and I don't want it to hurt you. And I don't want you to have to carry, a burden and all these things. And after I shared the story and after we worked through it a lot, she said these words that were so impacting for me and really speak to this thing of experiencing lavish abundance and goodness. And she said, I want you to know there is no place I would rather be right now than right here. And to hear those words in that moment was abundant and lavish goodness for my heart and really impacting in a very deep way where I went into that and I did all of my pre reading the story stuff and I hoped for a few breadcrumbs. Honestly, if I'm honest, I hoped that I could read the story and not get so dysregulated that the rest of the time would be lost.
Mhm.
I hoped that I would get a little bit of goodness that would help me go to the next step or whatever. But I have come away with lavish goodness as a result of that time. And yeah,
I want to go back to what she said because I'm picturing you as an 8 or a 9-year-old little girl.
yeah, yeah,
What would it have been like for an adult in your life to sit down by you
yeah,
and say those words? There is no place
yeah,
I would rather be.
yeah,
And yet this is how we heal the brain and the body and the emotion is that she came back for that little girl in that statement because that's what she needed.
yeah, yeah,
And I mean, it really does make me want to bawl
yeah, yeah,
because you are getting what you needed back then. It's
right.
it's called time travel, and it's a
Yeah,
real thing.
yeah. Well, and it helps, and I'm gonna go, I guess I'm jumping out of some kind of deep emotion here, but I wanna make this point that when we have that kind of an experience, our brain literally begins to create new neural networks, and we are able to get out of the stuck place of that particular story that we have been locked in for our whole lives.
Mhm.
And that's what happened to me in that moment. It was the words she said, it was the all of the dynamics of what was happening there in that moment, but even more, it's what happened in my brain and in my body as a result. That is absolutely, I have no doubt, life-changing for me.
Mhm. Well, we're talking about healing trauma, and that moment that is a rewiring of the brain calms the nervous system.
Yeah,
So love and safety and security is what actually calms the nervous system.
yeah,
So I want to say this really quick. There are two schools of thought, and I don't think they're separate. I think we can combine them. But we can get nervous system regulation tools to help us calm our nervous system without knowing the story.
yeah,
We can. We can have somebody work just with our anxiety that's showing up today that we don't even know why.
Yep.
I will tell you, when you add knowing the story, when you add that compassionate piece for why, it sets you up in a different way. And I will just say, usually you become a healer yourself
Yeah.
because that love that healed you, there's usually some type of, oh my God, I want other people to experience this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I'm big on, yes, let's heal our nervous system with practical tools, and let's have deep understanding, compassion over the little girl in the story.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful that we are people that hold this kind of space for others, and we have people that can hold this kind of space for us. And
Mm.
it's for me, and I know for you too, it has become one of life's greatest blessings that
Mhm.
this is now the kind of community that I have.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't, if you don't mind, go ahead and read that question one more time, and then we're going to close because we're going to keep going here for the next episode. But just maybe, would you leave our listeners with that question one more time?
Yes, I would love to. What feelings come up for you when you consider embracing the belief that you don't deserve mere crumbs, but are made for lavish outpourings of goodness and love?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, let's leave our listeners with that question. And I also want to hold, it could be a very painful question for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
And
scary to desire more than crumbs.
yeah, and we say this a lot here, but if that is true, reach out. Like, we cannot heal alone. I'm very convinced of that. And whatever it takes to engage with somebody who knows how to help you walk this path, find a way.
Amen.
Yeah. Good to be with you, Candace.
Good to be with you. Love you, Cher.
Love you too, friend.